My guest today is Michael Wilkerson, the founder and CEO of Stonewall Advisor, and he, frankly, is my source of information on much of this. Stonewall Advisors is an independent firm that helps its clients solve complex strategic and financial challenges. Welcome, Michael. It's good to see you.
Good to be with you, Dick.
Michael, let's talk about what you've taught me, the basic danger of central bank digital currency. One of my heroes is Nigel Farage, who pioneered Brexit, and he recently shared a perfect example of how CBDC can be used against you. Let's listen to him.
Well, think about it. Those Canadian truckers, they were legally and lawfully going about their business driving trucks, but legislation came in demanding that unless they'd been double vaxxed, they couldn't continue in their cabins doing long-distance lorry driving. And they protested, and in the end, their bank accounts were closed down by the Canadian government. Well, with the central bank digital currency, anyone that decides to stand up and fight against the government could be pressed down simply with the push of a button.
Now, we need subtitles on that. Lorry driver means truck driver. Got it, guys? Okay. So, talk about what Nigel just said, Michael, please.
Well, what he's talking about is the danger the CBDCs provide. If you think about the ability to see into every single transaction and know exactly what someone is buying or selling, have complete and total surveillance. Not only does this provide knowledge to the government, but of course it allows control, and it will influence behavior because people will make different decisions about how and where they're going to spend that money. This leads to the risk of social credit scoring, what's happening in China today, where the government itself is tracking and rewarding or penalizing individuals based on their political views, their political activities, things they buy and sell. It's a very un-American idea, and it further centralizes power in the hands of a very few.
Let's listen to what a Minnesota congressman and House Minority Whip said about this. His name is Tom Emmer, and he actually introduced a bill to stop the push for CBDC.
But the Federal Reserve should play no role in developing a central bank digital currency. The consequences, if we get it wrong, are far too serious. This kind of digital currency would give the federal government access to and control over literally every financial transaction conducted by Americans. We do not want to emulate the CCP. We should. Now,
Michael, you and I have talked about how this policy of controlling us by controlling our banking is already creeping into our policy, where conservative customers are cut out when they try to open even just checking accounts, let alone take loans. Tell me more about that, please.
Well, I appreciate what Representative Emmer had to say. You know, he's been taking the lead on this resistance against CBDCs and taking the lead on proper crypto regulation. What Mr. Farage mentioned is very clear. You know, this was a warning shot when we saw what happened to the Canadian truck drivers just across the border. Already in the U.S. today, we have asset forfeiture laws, seizure laws that allow governments, allow banks to close down accounts, seize funds. And what we've seen, especially in the last 3 years, has been an increasing rise of discrimination, frankly, against conservative voices, conservative views, debanking and deplatforming. This is just the first step. Under a system of CBDCs, of course, that control becomes even more concentrated and more dangerous.
That's fascinating, Michael. In the past, when you said asset forfeiture, my ears perked up because I used to be a talk radio host in Philadelphia, where the asset forfeiture law is a big deal because they move in and close down a house and claim a drug dealer who lived there, and everybody who lived there loses their apartment. But that's real estate. You're saying that the same concept of asset forfeiture, without proof, without a judicial warrant, without anybody finding anything, just the opinion of some kid in a bank, can result in closing all of your bank accounts and closing down the loan window. And tell us.
The danger is always there. The laws vary by states, but you're hitting on the main point, which is that banks can do what they want to do. When you put money in an account, they have some discretion over their ability to either close you down, limit access. And to your point, this is done without due process, without actually being convicted of a crime. an intelligence agency can whisper in the ear of a bank saying, we think this is a dubious account. We think you need to provide protections. And just as we saw in the tech industry around censoring information that was coming out around the 2020 elections, the same thing is possible for financial assets within our banking system.
Really good point. You know, with 6,800 banks, which we used to have, and even with 4,500 like we have now, you have a lot of choice. You can go anywhere and you can do your banking. They can't really shut you down. But in most countries, like Germany, for example, there I think it's just one or two banks. And, you know, everything is so centralized that there's tremendous government control. And we don't have that in the U.S. It's one of our freedoms that we don't even notice, we take for granted. But it's terribly important, and it's being compromised by the deliberate policies of the Fed, motivated by the financial needs of too big to fail banks.
Dick, hanging behind me is a portrait of Salmon Chase. He was the Treasury Secretary under President Lincoln during the Civil War. He did something very important, which is he created a national bank, which allowed the U.S. to have one currency to raise money for the war effort. So having a currency that everyone could use across state borders was very important. That, though, led to the development of the IRS and the Federal Reserve in subsequent decades. We saw during the Great Depression that crisis was used to consolidate power in the hands of the federal regulators. Around 9,000 banks were closed over the course of 4 years. But as the saying goes, regulators do not want to let a good crisis go to waste. And I think what you're seeing today in the wake of this new liquidity crisis is an awareness among regulators that they can do the same thing, that they can use this moment to weed out, as you mentioned, hundreds or even thousands of these banks that are not too big to fail, that are below the radar, that create some nuisance for them. The net effect of that, yes, we have a lot of banks. Is it a bit chaotic? Yes. But does it provide freedom and diversity and freedom of choice? Absolutely. I think it's a strength, not a weakness, to have a resilient system without one point of failure, one node of failure. We saw in 2008 that it was the concentration of assets in the too big to fail banks that actually led to the problem. So I don't believe that ultra consolidation is the solution here.
You're so right, Michael. You know, when Donald Trump said, they're coming for you, I'm just in the way, he was articulating a threat to our freedom from the government. And as I've been thinking about that over the ensuing weeks and months, there are so many examples of that. And this CBDC is a prime example. They want literally to police every step we take through our bank accounts. Police it, close it down, regulate it, punish us for it, and basically make us creatures of their will.
What's interesting about this, Dick, is CBDCs actually are a threat to the banks, whether they realize it or not, because this consolidates the issue of deposits onto the central bank's balance sheet. So if they issue CBDCs to you, me, a retail customer, those become liabilities of the central bank, which in a way disintermediates the banks, and especially the smaller banks that aren't part of the Fed system and don't have the privileged access that the too big to fail banks do. So this is difficult on many levels because it's restricting choice for consumers. It's an invasion of privacy.
Very good point.
Contravenes the Fourth Amendment and a right to privacy, a right to sanctuary, to be free from warrant. But importantly, again, as we said, it really increases the surveillance and control power of the federal government.
I got it. Out of time, though. So coming up, I'll tell you why climate change is going to help home run hitters. Stick around for that one.